I was a senior when all of this took place. Senioritis had completely set in, and it was right in the middle of football season. At our high school, football games were a huge deal. The team was actually pretty solid, and honestly, there was not much else to do in our dull little country town. One day during school, we were sitting in some pointless elective class. My friend JJ was in there with me, so naturally we spent most of the time messing around instead of paying attention. It was a Friday, and there was a game scheduled for later that evening. We had already decided we were going, and JJ, being the smooth talker he always was, turned his chair toward two girls in the class, Kayla and Ashley, and asked if they wanted to come along with us. We already knew them pretty well, so it did not feel awkward at all. They agreed to meet up later. After school, JJ dropped me off at home, and a few hours later, he came back to pick me up. Then we grabbed Kayla and Ashley. We drove over to the back parking lot of the school near the woods. We had some Four Locos in the car and kept an eye out to make sure nobody was around. We poured some into water bottles so we could sneak them into the bleachers. We headed over and made sure to grab seats at the very top row. The game started a bit late, so by the third quarter, it was already getting dark, and by the fourth, it was completely night. For once, our team was losing badly, so a lot of students started leaving early. We stayed, though, since we planned to hang out on the field afterward anyway. When the game ended, the loss was pretty embarrassing. The stands and field emptied out quickly. Players rushed back to the locker room, and the visiting team slowly made their way to their buses. Within about 10 minutes, only a handful of people were left, including us. By that point, we were pretty drunk, and the loss did not really bother us. When the field lights shut off, everything went almost completely dark, except for some faint moonlight. Everyone else had gone home. We walked out onto the field and laid down for a bit. JJ ran back to the car to grab more drinks. It was probably around 10 p.m. by then. When he came back, he suggested we go into the woods next to the field. The girls immediately got nervous, which honestly made it seem more fun to us. When they refused, JJ and I suddenly got up and ran toward the woods, leaving them behind in the darkness, knowing they would panic and follow. And they did. We crawled under a torn section of the fence that students always used to get in and out, then started heading down a small slope into the woods. The girls hesitated, but eventually followed. JJ and I ran ahead, planning to hide and scare them. As soon as they heard us sprinting, they shouted for us to stop. We managed to lose them and ducked behind a couple of trees, laughing quietly to ourselves. After a few seconds, JJ tapped me and pointed in a certain direction. Even in the darkness, with only faint moonlight slipping through the trees, we could see a tall black figure standing between two trees about 15 feet away. It was absolutely terrifying. Then it spoke. It was a woman's voice, and she said, "You kids shouldn't be in here." We just stood there frozen, staring at her. But something felt wrong. She seemed to be getting larger and closer very quickly, yet we could not see any leg movement, or what we assumed were legs. There were no footsteps at all. Jay and I turned and bolted. We ran while shouting the girls' names until we found them. They followed us as we rushed out of the woods. We told them to just keep running to the car. Once we got there, we finally explained what we saw, saying there was some incredibly tall woman in the woods. JJ admitted that if I had not seen it too, he would have thought he imagined the whole thing. The girls were shaken, asking if we were joking, but we were not. We sat in the car watching the woods, waiting to see if anyone would come out. No one ever did. The biggest question was why an older woman would be out there alone at night. It was not a trail or anything like that. The area was fenced off. There was no security at the school back then either, so it was not that. Afterward, we went to hang out at JJ's house, and I will leave the rest of that night up to you. Fast forward to the following summer. I had a job at the school as a custodian, something I did every summer since I kept getting raises. There were about 4 of us working there, 2 older custodians and me, along with another guy my age. One day, I was in the center courtyard mowing the grass when I noticed someone standing at an upstairs window. It looked like an older woman, maybe around 65, with short curly hair. Her face was hard to make out because of the glare on the glass. I stopped mowing, looked up at her, and waved. She did not respond. She did not even move. I quickly went inside to find my boss and asked him who the woman upstairs was. He looked confused and asked what I was talking about. I told him to come with me. I led him to the math hallway upstairs where I had seen her. But when we got there, all the classroom doors were shut and the lights were off. The room I thought she had been in was completely empty. He told me there was no one else in the building and suggested I should get some coffee. Then he went back downstairs. I followed, but I was seriously unsettled. After finishing the lawn, I started mopping the upstairs hallways and classrooms. Eventually, I reached the math hallway. I opened every door and turned on all the lights so I could clean each room. I had my radio on the floor playing music like usual. Then, over the music, I heard a clear woman's voice say, "Young man." It came from one of the classrooms, but I could not tell which one. I turned off the music immediately and began checking each room, hoping to find someone. Every classroom was empty. I even looked behind desks. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I felt pure panic take over. I ran downstairs and told my boss again that someone was upstairs, that I had heard a voice. He went back up with me, and I explained everything, but once again, we found no one. He eventually told me to go home for the day and get some rest, thinking I was losing it. That was when I started connecting the two experiences. What if they were related? What if the thing JJ and I saw in the woods, and the woman I saw and heard in the school were somehow the same? The next day, I told my boss I did not want to work in the math hallway anymore because it freaked me out too much. For the rest of the summer, I avoided that hallway completely. Ever since then, I have been convinced that my old high school is haunted by the spirit of an older woman. I honestly cannot come up with any other explanation. This happened when I was 15, during my sophomore year of high school. Unfortunately, our lunch periods were assigned randomly. That year, the only people I knew in my lunch period were my friends Liam and Mike. A few months into the school year, a new kid showed up in my first period astronomy class. Our teacher liked to joke around, so he made the kid stand up and introduce himself to everyone. His name was Craig. The teacher teased him for a bit, then told him to take a seat. I sat in the back row, and the only empty desk left was right next to me in the corner. Craig walked over and sat down beside me. Class had not officially started yet, so everyone was still talking. As he sat down, he scanned the room. Then I felt him looking at me. I turned, we locked eyes, and he gave a small nod and said, "What's up?" I replied, "Hey, what's up?" He introduced himself, and I told him my name too. Craig was a white guy with patchy facial hair that looked kind of uneven and awkward. He was not good looking, but he was not ugly either. Just a pretty average guy overall. He started making small talk, and I tried to be friendly because I knew how tough a first day at a new school can be. I was probably the first person he actually spoke to there. That day, we had to pair up for an assignment. Naturally, Craig asked if I wanted to work with him. I agreed, since I did not really have any close friends in that class anyway. We were given laptops from the cart to start working. Pretty quickly, I realized I did not like his sense of humor. He joked constantly and acted like we were already close friends, but his jokes felt off. Every time he said something, he would follow it with this awkward laugh. He swore a lot and kept making crude and inappropriate jokes. I am not overly sensitive to that kind of stuff, but with him, it just felt excessive. By the end of class, we had to exchange phone numbers for the project. and I went on to my next class. Eventually, it was lunchtime. Mike was absent that day, so it was just Liam and me sitting at our usual round table. At one point, I noticed Liam glance past me at someone behind me. Then a chair scraped next to me, and I turned to see Craig sitting down. He tapped my shoulder and said, "What's up, buddy?" Inside, I felt a bit defeated. It seemed like he was going to sit with us every day now. I tried to stay open-minded and give him a chance. Maybe he was not that bad. Liam was polite at first too, but after a while, Craig started saying strange things again. Liam picked up on it and kept giving me looks whenever Craig was not paying attention. That lunch pretty much confirmed it. Something about Craig felt off. I am not judging people for being quiet or awkward, but this felt different. The things he said had a darker tone to them, like it went beyond just being socially awkward. After school that Friday, I started walking home while texting my group chat about plans for later. While I was walking, I got a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, I realized it was Craig. The message said, "Turn around." I turned and saw Craig running toward me on the sidewalk, waving. I muttered, "Oh God," under my breath and stopped to wait. When he reached me, he asked how far I lived from school. I said about 10 minutes, and he said he would walk with me. Then he asked if I wanted to quickly finish the assignment together over some beers. I told him I already had plans with my friends. He asked what we were doing, which immediately made me uneasy. It felt like he was trying to invite himself. I said we were just hanging out at Liam's house. He actually asked if he could come. I did not know what to say, so I made up an excuse about Liam's mom not letting new people over right away. That seemed to work. Craig kept walking with me, and I started wondering if he was going to follow me all the way home. That is exactly what he did. When I reached my house, I said, "All right, man, see you later," and gave him a quick fist bump. He said goodbye and kept walking, but I noticed him glance back at me. I looked away. I texted my group chat about how strange he was, and Liam agreed with everything I said. We made real plans to hang out later at Liam's place around 9. A couple of hours later, Craig sent me a really unsettling message. He asked, "Yo, what's going on in front of your house? Why is there a cop car?" I replied, "What are you talking about?" and rushed outside to check. There was no police car. Instead, Craig was standing in my driveway, laughing like a complete idiot. He said, "Got you." Then he added, "I thought you were going to Liam's house." I said, "Yeah, later," and then asked, "Why are you acting weird?" That time, he did not laugh. He looked offended. I told him I had to go inside and shut the door. Almost immediately, he texted me saying, "Bro, what the hell?" I was honestly stunned. I had just met this guy that day and only spent about 40 minutes with him. Yet he was already acting obsessed, following me around, and now basically stalking me. He had tricked me just to see if I was home. I texted back, "You're freaking me out, bro." That turned out to be a mistake. He sent a long message saying he thought I seemed cool and different from everyone else. But now he realized I was just like everybody else. I took a screenshot and sent it to my friends. They were shocked, but also laughing at how insane it was. I emailed my teacher asking if I could complete the assignment alone and explained everything. Then I left my house and went to Liam's place early just to get out. While I was there, Craig tried calling me. I ignored it and let it ring. I knew Monday was going to be uncomfortable. Later that night, around 11 or midnight, I came back home. My parents and sister were not there, which was normal. I locked the door and went up to my room, then started watching YouTube. At some point, I heard the back doorbell ring. Our house has a separate bell for the back door, and it sounds different from the front. I went downstairs, thinking it might be my sister, but the backyard lights were off, and no one was visible through the glass door. I opened the main door slightly while keeping the screen door locked and said hello. I clearly heard the sound of a shoe scraping against the concrete patio just out of sight to the left. I immediately shut and locked the door, then ran upstairs to call my dad, but he did not answer. Right then, my phone rang again. It was Craig. I did not pick up. He then texted, "Come outside, shitbag." I replied, "I'm calling the police." To my surprise, he answered, Okay, I'm leaving." It was him. He had been hiding in my yard, waiting for me to come out. I sent screenshots to my family, my friends, and the school. The school contacted his parents. Apparently, his family had a history of moving frequently because he kept causing problems at every school he attended. I can only imagine what he might have done to other people who did not want to be around him. He never showed up to class on Monday or any day after that. If I had to guess, he transferred schools again. I grew up in a small rural town in New Brunswick. It was the beginning of September, and it was my first day back at school. I had been held back during my senior year, so I was returning as a 19-year-old. Since I lived in a rural area, the middle school and high school shared the same building. Because of that, I already knew most of the students since the school was small. That morning, I had a study hall for Period A, which was the first class of the day. While sitting there, I noticed a kid across the room that I had never seen before. That was unusual in a school like ours. I decided to walk over and introduce myself. He told me his name was Chester and said he had just moved to the area. I offered to show him around and pointed out where his next class would be. As we walked through the school, something about him felt a little strange. While I was giving him the tour, he started asking questions. At first, they were normal, like how long I had been at the school or where certain classrooms were. But then his questions started to get a bit uncomfortable. One question in particular stuck with me. He asked for my home address and my Snapchat. That immediately felt off. I refused to give him my address, but for some reason, I decided to give him my Snapchat anyway and continued with my day. Later on, during the last period, I had English class. There were only about 9 students in the room, since it was a lower level class. I sat down and after a moment, glanced behind me and saw Chester sitting there, eating a really gross-looking sandwich. From across the room, he stared directly at me and motioned for me to come over. My teacher, Mr. Bass, was about to begin the lesson, so I ignored him and focused on class. A few minutes later, I looked up again and saw him still staring at me. This time, he looked irritated. Once again, he gestured for me to come over, and again I ignored him and kept reading. Then my phone buzzed. It was a Snapchat message from him that said, "Follow me." I replied that I could not because we were in the middle of class. Right after that, I watched him stand up and ask Mr. Bass if he could use the bathroom. He then walked out into the hallway. I became curious about what he wanted, so about 5 minutes later, I asked to go to the bathroom as well. When I stepped into the hallway, I was not sure where he had gone. I checked each hallway until I finally spotted him. He was about 50 feet ahead, walking very slowly. I kept my distance so he would not notice me following him. Eventually, he turned down a hallway that was rarely used for classes. That section of the school was mostly for storage rooms, offices, and bathrooms. I watched as he opened a door and stepped inside, closing it behind him. When I reached the door, I realized it led to the school basement. There was no way I was going down there. I turned around and went back to class. As soon as I sat down, my phone buzzed again. It was him. He sent a message asking why I did not go into the basement. Then he sent a photo of himself down there, still eating that disgusting sandwich. After that, he sent another message telling me to come down. At that point, I felt genuinely uneasy. I told him to leave me alone, then removed and blocked him. When I got home, I started working on my homework right away. By the time I finished, it was around 11 p.m., and I was home alone. I was putting my books away when my phone lit up with a notification from Snapchat. Someone had added me. The username was "Why didn't you enter the basement?" It was obviously him, so I blocked it. A few minutes later, another request came through. This one was named "Why'd you block me?" I blocked that too. Then another request appeared, this time with a more unsettling name. It said, "I know where you live," followed by another message saying I'm right outside your house. At that exact moment, I heard the sound of glass breaking downstairs. I immediately called the police and explained what was happening. The operator told me to find a safe place to hide and lock myself in. I hung up and ran to the hallway closet. I could hear footsteps moving through the house, starting downstairs and then coming up the stairs. I slowly cracked the closet door open and saw him. At the end of the dark hallway stood Chester. It did not seem like he realized I had seen him at first. Then he turned his head toward the closet. I stayed completely still, hoping he would not notice me. I pulled myself further back behind a large container inside the closet. He walked over and opened the closet door. I stayed hidden behind the container while he fumbled around, trying to find the light. After a moment, he gave up. I heard his footsteps move away and head back downstairs. Seconds later, there was a knock at the front door. The police had arrived. I rushed out and let them in, explaining everything that had just happened. But by the time they got there, he was gone. There was no one on the property. They later determined that he had escaped through a basement window. I gave the officers all the account names he had used, and they said they would try to track them down. The next day at school, I went straight to the principal to report everything. What he told me made it even worse. There was no student in the school named Chester. There were no records of anyone by that name ever attending. I felt a chill run through me. When they checked the security footage, they discovered that he had entered through a back door and blended in with the students. I never saw him again after that day, and I never heard anything further from the police. Even now, I still think about why he wanted me to go into that basement. All I know is that he was easily the most dangerous person I have ever encountered, and I have no idea what he had planned.